Welcome to All in All. Today we're taking a deep dive into a phrase that's, well, it's become a real cornerstone of critical thinking, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
But it often sparks, pretty intense debate. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
ECREE, as it's sometimes called.
Right. ECREE. It's a statement popularized by a famous astronomer, often cited in discussions about everything from UFOs or UAPs now to medical cures, even just how we evaluate the news we see every day.
It pops up everywhere.
But what does it truly mean? Like, really mean? Where did it come from, this idea that, some claims just need more convincing than others?
Yeah.
And why is it so vital, maybe more vital than ever, for navigating the vast, honestly overwhelming ocean of information we encounter?
It's a crucial tool.
So our mission in this deep dive is basically to unpack this powerful idea. We want to explore its surprisingly rich origins,
Which are fascinating, by the way.
its profound significance for how we think, its real-world impact, on science, but also on your personal decisions, how its interpretation has evolved. Because it has, right?
Oh, definitely.
And maybe most importantly, its practical relevance for you listening right now.
Yeah.
So, let's unpack this.
It's a truly fascinating journey, I think, because while the phrase itself might sound pretty modern.
Right, very Sagan-esque.
Exactly. But its core wisdom, it really resonates through centuries of human thought. We're not just looking at a catchphrase here. We're tracing an intellectual lineage, really. It connects us to some of the greatest minds who grappled with that fundamental question. How do we truly know what we know?
And how much certainty do we need?
Precisely. How much certainty do we need to actually believe something? Hashtag the historical tapestry of a core idea.
Okay, so let's start where most people probably encounter its public life, at least in its modern form. Most people, I think, immediately associate extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence with the renowned astronomer Carl Sagan.
Yeah, definitely. Cosmos.
Exactly. Cosmos, his books. He absolutely played a massive, pivotal role in popularizing it. He wielded this principle like a precision tool when he was examining phenomena beyond the ordinary, like discussions about extraterrestrial life, or when he was, debunking pseudoscience and what he saw as irrational beliefs.
That's right. Sagan was absolutely instrumental in embedding this principle into the public consciousness. He made it a familiar touchstone in sort of skeptical discourse. He really gave it a voice that reached millions.
But the underlying idea, this intellectual lineage you mentioned, it goes back much further than the 20th century, doesn't it?
Oh, way further back. It's really an evolution in how humanity approaches knowledge itself.
Okay.
So if we delve into its intellectual ancestry, we can actually trace it back to the 18th century. A good starting point is the brilliant French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace. He articulated a very similar principle, though maybe not as catchy. He stated that the more extraordinary a fact, the more it needs to be supported by strong evidence.
Right. So the weirder it sounds.
The stronger the proof needs to be.
Yeah.
This highlights an early, really profound understanding that the weight of proof should intuitively match the peculiarity or the improbability of the claim being made. It's all about proportionality and belief.
Proportionality. I like that.
Your level of conviction should ideally directly correlate with the strength and, the peculiarity of the evidence you have.
So even back then, these brilliant minds recognized that if something sounds wildly unlikely, you shouldn't just take it at face value.
No, absolutely not.
It's not about immediate acceptance or rejection, right?
Right.
But about adjusting your level of belief to the evidence.
Exactly. Calibrating your belief.
And speaking of the 18th century, David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, he comes to mind immediately.
Yeah.
His insights from 1748 are they're foundational to this, aren't they?
Absolutely foundational. Hume famously posited that a wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. Simple, but profound.
It sounds so simple, but yeah.
And he didn't just say it. He then took this incredibly powerful idea and famously applied it directly to the concept of miracles.
Ah, the miracles argument. That's a big one.
It really was. His argument against miracles was truly revolutionary for its time. He stated that no testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle unless its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish.
Wow. That's such a powerful, almost mathematical way of putting it.
It is, isn't it?
Suggesting a careful weighing of probabilities against, lived experience and consistent observation.
Exactly. He was essentially saying, look, if an event violates every natural law you've ever observed consistently.
Like gravity suddenly stopping.
Right. then the evidence for that event has to be so unbelievably strong, so overwhelming, that it would be even more unbelievable that the evidence itself was false or mistaken or fabricated.
The evidence being wrong has to be the bigger miracle.
Precisely.
That sets a high bar.
Indeed. Hume's approach was a real paradigm shift. It emphasized empirical observation, the uniform experience of mankind, over, traditional authority or faith or just anecdotal accounts. His ideas really helped pave the way for a more evidence-based view of the world.
And then, jumping forward a bit, you mentioned Marcello Truzzi.
Yeah, in the 1970s, Truzzi, a sociologist and investigator of paranormal claims, he framed it quite explicitly as an extraordinary claim requires extraordinary proof.
Proof, not evidence.
Interesting. Yeah, slightly different emphasis. This iteration of the phrase really solidified its place in modern skeptical discourse, particularly in discussions about, parapsychology and pseudoscience. But as we'll get into, this phrasing also sparked its own set of debates about what extraordinary truly means and how subjective that interpretation can actually be.
Right, because proof sounds even more definitive than evidence.
Exactly. It raises the stakes.
So it's clear this concept didn't just appear out of nowhere, or even just with Sagan. It evolved hand in hand with much broader intellectual currents, specifically, the dawn of empiricism and the whole scientific revolution.
Absolutely connected. Before this period, philosophical thought, heavily influenced by the ancient Greeks, often relied on purely deductive logic. They were seeking absolute certainty, much like you find in geometry.
Right, starting from axioms.
Exactly. You prove something definitively from axioms. But that approach, well, it had its limitations when you're trying to understand the messy, unpredictable natural world.
Yeah, nature doesn't always follow neat logic.
Not always. And that was a significant barrier to understanding it. The pivotal shift really started gaining traction, arguably even back in the 13th century, long before the scientific revolution truly took off, with figures like Roger Bacon.
Roger Bacon, okay. Before Francis Bacon.
Yes, centuries before. Roger Bacon championed empiricism. He argued quite forcefully that reasoning does not suffice, but experience does, to verify claims about the world.
Experience over pure reason.
Right. This was a crucial transformative move towards direct observation and experimentation as a foundational element for knowledge, moving away from just abstract deduction alone. He even noted that all things must be verified by experience, particularly when dealing with what were then called occult forces in nature.
Like magnetism.
Exactly, like the properties of lodestones, which you couldn't just explain by pure logic. You had to observe them, test them. This laid the intellectual groundwork for a completely different way of building knowledge.
And this push for experience, for observation, it must have been utterly transformed by technology. I'm thinking the printing press.
Oh, the printing press around 1450 was an absolute game changer. No question. Think about it. Before print, empirical claims or even just anecdotal data were largely accepted or rejected based on local authority or maybe oral tradition.
Right, word of mouth.
But with printing, suddenly these claims, these observations, they could be widely exchanged, sifted, debated, criticized, refined, corroborated, or falsified by a much, much wider community.
Across distances, across time even.
Exactly. This allowed for the continual revision and, crucially, the repeatability of empirical claims on an unprecedented scale.
Right.
This mass dissemination of ideas and experimental results truly made the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries possible. It fostered a pragmatic system that valued verifiable observations and probabilities over absolute, unshakable certainties.
That focus on repeatability is key, isn't it?
Absolutely fundamental. The ability to widely disseminate, scrutinize, and crucially replicate experimental results was nothing short of revolutionary. And this is precisely where institutions like the Royal Society, established in the 17th century in England, stepped in.
Right. Nullius in verba, take nobody's word.
Exactly their motto. They formalized a commitment to critical and reiterated scrutiny of experimental results. They established a standard for corroboration that is still central to science today. Francis Bacon, now we're talking Francis, an early advocate of reproducibility and the experimental method. He explicitly stated that when presenting an experiment, one should provide a clear account of the manner in which I made it, so that others could devise proofs more trustworthy and exquisite, if such can be found.
So others can check your work, basically.
Precisely. This laid the foundational groundwork for modern scientific peer review, independent verification, and that relentless pursuit of reproducibility. It built the system.
So with this burgeoning empirical framework where observation and experimentation became paramount, it was only natural that people started challenging claims that seemed to defy natural laws, particularly the widespread belief in miracles.
Yeah, that was bound to happen. Before this era, many people simply accepted miracles as divine interventions without much, critical examination.
It was just accepted wisdom.
Pretty much. And this is where Baruch Spinoza in the 17th century offered another powerful argument that directly challenged this view. He asserted that natural laws were established by God and are therefore immutable, unchanging.
God wouldn't break his own rules.
That was Spinoza's point. For him, the very idea of God acting against his own nature by violating these immutable laws was an evident absurdity. He didn't think miracles were God-breaking rules. He attributed what were considered miracles to human ignorance.
Ignorance, meaning?
Meaning there were events whose causes simply couldn't be explained by natural reason or the limited knowledge of the observer at the time. Not that God was somehow intervening supernaturally. Nature, Spinoza believed, cannot be contravened. She preserves a fixed and immutable order. His argument really stripped away the supernatural veil from unexplained phenomena, pushing for a naturalistic explanation instead.
Find the natural cause, don't just assume a supernatural one.
Exactly. And then Hume, again, provides such a detailed and, frankly, compelling argument specifically regarding miracles. He described it as a contest of two opposite experiences.
A contest, okay.
On one side, you have the consistent, uniform experience of natural laws, your example. A piece of lead always falling when dropped, observed 1,000,000 times. Consistent experience. On the other side, you have a claim that defies this. Someone says, I saw the lead remain suspended in the air.
Okay.
Hume's point was, if an event, by definition, violates observed natural laws, then the evidence for such an event must demonstrably outweigh those 1,000,000 contradictions to be believed.
Outweigh 1,000,000 observations.
Yeah. He argued 100,000 testimonies wouldn't be enough if they're up against 1,000,000 direct, consistent observations to the contrary. It's about weighing the balance of probabilities based on overwhelming accumulated experience.
It's a very practical, almost quantitative approach to belief, isn't it?
It really is. He's essentially saying, look, if you've seen lead fall 1,000,000 times, for it to stay suspended just once, you'd need evidence that's even stronger and more reliable than those 1,000,000 observations combined.
Which is practically impossible evidence to get.
It sets an incredibly high bar for claims that contradict all known experience, which is precisely what extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence is all about. It formalizes that intuition. #, what exactly is extraordinary? Navigating subjectivity and objectivity.
Okay, so we've traced this incredible lineage, seeing how minds like Laplace, Hume, Bacon, Spinoza, how they all contributed pieces to this puzzle, laying the groundwork. But that journey leads us straight to a fascinating and, I think, crucial question. If this whole principle hinges on extraordinary claims needing extraordinary evidence, what exactly is extraordinary anyway?
Ah, yes. The $1,000,000 question.
Because that term, as you might imagine, is really at the heart of much of the debate, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
The central criticism you often hear is that extraordinary can feel incredibly subjective. Some might argue it really just means, look, if an idea makes me sufficiently uncomfortable, or if it challenges my deeply held worldview, you're going to have to overwhelm me completely to get me to accept it, like a personal threshold.
That's a very valid point of critique, and it definitely highlights the challenge of applying this principle consistently and objectively. Marcello Truzzi himself, while popularizing the phrase, he attempted to define extraordinary as simply unexpected. But even he conceded that this unexpectedness is ultimately a subjective psychological reaction and relative to our own experience and background.
So it depends on who you are and what you've seen.
Exactly. Which highlights the inherent difficulty of establishing a universally objective standard for what counts as extraordinary.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think of the island example.
Yeah.
If you lived your whole life on a remote island and had never, ever seen a dog,
Okay.
its existence, this furry creature that barks and fetches, would require the same level of extraordinary evidence for you as, say, a fire-breathing dragon.
Really? A dog and a dragon?
To you, in that context, yes. Because both are equally extraordinary to your limited, isolated experience. They're completely outside your known reality. Your personal experience shapes your perception of what's ordinary versus extraordinary.
Wow, okay. That island example really drives home the point about how personal experience frames everything.
It does.
But despite these subjective leanings, Science, as a process, constantly strives to objectify extraordinary, doesn't it? Can't just be about feelings.
No, exactly. It's not about what we want to be true or what feels comfortable. It's about what the evidence suggests, regardless of our desires. For example, if someone claims they've found a wonder drug for immortality.
We'd all love that.
Right. We desperately want it to be true, but you'd still demand extraordinary evidence for that claim, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Rigorous trials, data.
Your desire doesn't lower the evidentiary bar. In fact, it probably should make you more skeptical. So, in a scientific context, an extraordinary claim is typically defined not by personal discomfort, but as one that is inconsistent with what we know and understand about reality.
So inconsistent with current models.
Or falls outside of the currently accepted model of reality. It's about challenging established scientific consensus, the known laws of physics as we currently understand them.
Okay, that's clear.
Consider the classic dragon in the garage analogy, popularized by Sagan.
Ah, yes, the invisible dragon.
Right. If someone claims they have a dragon in their garage, your first instinct is probably, okay, show me.
Yeah, let's see it.
But what if they then say, well, the dragon is invisible, it's intangible, it doesn't leave footprints, it's undetectable by any known instrument, and it hovers silently, making it impossible to touch, find, or see.
Oh, there's no way to check.
Exactly. In that scenario, the claim becomes unprovable or disprovable. It becomes unfalsifiable. And that makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to provide sufficient proof or even just evidence, because if you can't even, in principle, detect it.
How can you gather evidence for it?
Precisely. This highlights how an extraordinary claim can sometimes become unfalsifiable and thus scientifically meaningless because science deals with testable claims.
That's a great example of how a claim can shield itself from evidence. But science doesn't just rely on these qualitative definitions, right? It uses math, statistics.
Oh, absolutely. It has developed incredibly rigorous statistical and probabilistic approaches that attempt to quantify extraordinary and set clear benchmarks, moving beyond just intuition.
Like Bayesian reasoning. I hear that term a lot.
Yes, Bayesian reasoning is a perfect example. It's a powerful mathematical framework that basically demonstrates how we should update our beliefs when we get new evidence.
Update beliefs mathematically.
But in a way, yes.
Yeah.
It takes your initial probability of something being true, your prior belief, and it rigorously adjusts that belief based on how likely the new evidence would be if your initial belief was correct versus if it was wrong.
Okay, walk me through an example.
Sure. Imagine someone claims to have a special coin that lands on heads every single time. No tails, ever.
Highly unlikely.
Exactly. Let's say very conservatively that the prior probability of such a magical coin actually existing is incredibly small, maybe 1 in 1 million. Your starting belief is, that's almost certainly not real.
Right.
Now, you flip this coin 20 times and it lands on heads every single time. Heads, heads, heads. 20 times.
Okay, that's weird.
That observation, 20 heads in a row, provides extraordinary evidence against the ordinary probability of a normal, fair coin. The probability of getting 20 heads in a row with a normal coin is astronomically low, about 1 in a million itself, actually.
The same odds.
Roughly. So the observed evidence, 20 consecutive heads, drastically increases the probability that it's actually that rare special coin, even though your initial belief in such a coin was extremely small. The evidence forces a dramatic update to your belief. You have to seriously consider the extraordinary explanation now.
That's fascinating. So the evidence isn't just the observation itself, but how much it shifts our understanding of those prior probabilities.
Exactly. It's about how much the observed data makes us rethink what we initially thought was most likely. How surprising is this result, given our baseline assumptions?
And science uses actual thresholds for this.
In many fields, yes. There are established gold standards for what constitutes extraordinary evidence, especially for claims that would overturn fundamental theories. In particle physics, for instance, the famous 5 sigma standard is the benchmark for announcing a new discovery, like the Higgs boson.
5 sigma. What does that mean in real terms?
It indicates an extremely low probability that the observed result is just a random fluke. So low, it's approximately a 1 in 3.5 million chance that the effect is due to random fluctuation rather than a real discovery.
Wow. 1 in 3.5 million.
Yeah. To put that into perspective, it's like flipping a perfectly fair coin and getting heads maybe 21 or 22 times in a row. That's the level of certainty physicists demand before announcing something truly new and potentially revolutionary.
Okay, that's a seriously high bar. What about other sciences?
Well, in softer sciences like psychology or neuroscience, while they don't always reach 5 sigma, a p-value, which is related to statistical significance as low as, say, 0.1%, might be considered extraordinary evidence for a significant effect in some contexts.
Still pretty low odds of being chance.
Yes, but importantly, these fields have also faced public replication crises in recent years.
Right, I've heard about that.
This suggests that perhaps some previously accepted extraordinary claims in those areas may have been accepted with insufficient scrutiny or based on results that were not robustly reproducible by other labs. It's led to a lot of soul-searching and a reevaluation of evidentiary standards in those fields.
That's a crucial point about the replication crisis. Right. It really underscores that even within science, applying these standards for extraordinary evidence can be challenging. And sometimes, the self-correcting nature of science has to kick in forcefully.
Absolutely. And maybe it's important to clarify that amount isn't quite the right word when we talk about extraordinary evidence. It's not simply about having more evidence, like piling on more anecdotes.
Okay.
It's more about the quality and nature of the evidence required to overturn a deeply entrenched or widely accepted model of reality. If a claim directly contradicts numerous other well-designed studies without a really good explanation, or if it challenges widely accepted scientific principles, like claiming a simple pill cures all cancers without side effects, or that vaccines cause widespread harm despite mountains of evidence otherwise, then the data and the paper presenting that claim are going to need to be, frankly, impeccable.
Impeccable how?
We're talking incredibly robust methodologies, large sample sizes, multiple independent replications, proper control groups, double blinding where possible, ruling out all plausible alternative explanations. It needs to be the kind of evidence that forces a fundamental, undeniable shift in our understanding of how the world works. It has to be bulletproof.
Okay, let's bring this home then. Why does this powerful principle ECREE matter for you, the listener, in your daily life? Because it's not just for scientists arguing about particles, right?
Not at all. It's incredibly practical.
Yeah. It seems absolutely vital, almost like an immediate survival skill for safeguarding against the sheer amount of misinformation and, frankly, scams that bombard us constantly. My personal rule of thumb is pretty simple. If someone is making money off a claim, especially one that sounds way too good to be true,
alarm bells should ring.
Yeah, you should be super duper skeptical. That's got to be your first line of defense, doesn't it?
That's a truly critical and practical starting point. And health scams are a particularly insidious area where this principle is crucial. They prey on hope, on fear.
Right. People are vulnerable.
Exactly. And it's so important to understand that just because something is labeled natural doesn't automatically mean it's safe or effective. Arsenic is natural. Cyanide is natural.
Good point. Natural doesn't equal safe.
Not at all. And in fact, some natural products can even be harmful. They might interact dangerously with proven medical treatments you're already taking, or perhaps worse, they might simply delay you from seeking proper evidence-based care until it's too late.
So what should people do?
Always, always, always do your homework. Research online, search for the product name, plus words like review, complaint, or scam. Look for reputable sources, scientific studies, reports from actual medical institutions, not just glowing testimonials on the seller's website.
Right, check the source.
And most importantly, consult your doctor or a qualified healthcare professional before taking any new supplement or embarking on some unproven therapy. Be incredibly wary of claims that a single device or remedy can treat all types of cancer or diabetes or whatever.
Because different diseases need different treatments.
Exactly. All cancers are fundamentally different and require tailored, evidence-based treatments developed through rigorous research. And remember this key fact. Unlike prescription drugs, government agencies like the FDA do not approve ads or even the products themselves for dietary supplements for safety or effectiveness before they hit the market.
That's huge. They don't check them first.
Not for safety or whether they actually work. The responsibility for checking those claims often falls squarely on you, the consumer, to seek out the real evidence or, more often, the lack thereof.
Wow. Say that's a really important distinction. The FDA isn't vetting these claims beforehand. It puts a huge burden on us.
It really does.
So beyond avoiding outright scams, ECREE is fundamental to just evaluating the vast amount of information we encounter every day, right? For making informed decisions about anything.
Absolutely.
And it can be so tempting to just read a blog post or a news article summary or see a quick social media post and think, okay, I'm informed now. But for any claim that sounds significant, especially some surprising scientific finding, you mentioned this before, you should absolutely always strive to read the original study yourself, if possible.
This is, I think, an absolute mandate for truly informed decision-making in the information age. These secondary sources, news articles, blogs, social media posts, they are, by their very nature, secondhand interpretations. Someone else read it and is telling you what they think it means.
And they might get it wrong. Or have an agenda.
Exactly. They're prone to sensationalism, miracle cure found, agenda-driven content, oversimplification because nuance is hard to convey quickly, and sometimes outright inaccuracies, especially when written by non-experts who might misunderstand complex scientific details. You're implicitly trusting someone else's interpretation, and frankly, people are inherently flawed and biased.
So go to the source.
Yeah.
But scientific papers can be dense and intimidating. How do you assess their credibility if you do find one?
That's a fair point. They can be tough. But there are things you can look for. First, consider the authors. Are they recognized experts in that specific field? Do they have affiliations with reputable universities or research institutions? What's their track record?
Okay, author credentials. What else?
The publication venue matters immensely. Is it a high-impact, peer-reviewed journal known for rigorous standards, like Nature, Science, Genema, The Lancet, or is it a low-impact journal you've never heard of, or potentially even a predatory journal that basically accepts almost anything for a publication fee?
Predatory journals. They just publish anything if you pay.
Pretty much. They mimic legitimate journals but lack proper peer review. So the journal's reputation is a big clue. And crucially, evaluate the study's consistency with existing knowledge. Does it conflict drastically with numerous other well-established studies in the field without providing a very compelling explanation and incredibly strong evidence for why all those other studies were wrong?
Right. Does it fit or does it overturn the apple cart?
Exactly. If a paper claims to overturn widely accepted scientific principles, again, like a simple universal cancer cure, or claiming that established vaccines are fundamentally dangerous despite overwhelming global consensus, then the data and the paper itself have to be absolutely impeccable. It has to withstand intense scrutiny from all angles.
And we've seen the real-world consequences when that scrutiny isn't sufficient. Even within science itself, haven't we? That replication crisis you mentioned earlier.
It truly is a stark public warning. It shows that even the scientific process isn't immune to these challenges. Recent research scandals, particularly in fields like behavioral and social sciences, and the broader replication crisis, they highlight this point vividly. We've seen entire areas of research, like certain types of behavioral priming, become seriously questioned or even largely debunked because the initial, often splashy findings simply did not replicate when independent researchers tried to repeat the experiments meticulously.
So the cool results didn't hold up?
Often, no. This really emphasizes the critical importance of replication, independent repetition as a fundamental prerequisite evidence before we can draw robust conclusions, especially for surprising findings. It's not enough to just find a startling result once. It needs to be repeatable by others to help correct for potential bias, statistical flukes, methodological errors, or even just unforeseen contextual factors.
So replication is like built-in ECREE for science itself.
In a way, yes. This crisis isn't just about failed studies. It's a stark reminder that even within science, initial extraordinary findings demand relentless, independent scrutiny, and that reproducibility is really the bedrock of reliable knowledge.
Okay, so all of this spotting scams, evaluating information, understanding scientific reliability, it really boils down to one foundational skill, doesn't it? Critical thinking.
That's the core of it all.
It's not just for scientists or academics. It seems like an absolutely essential skill for everyone trying to navigate today's complex, often confusing information landscape. It's about equipping you, the listener, to be a discerning consumer of information, not just a passive recipient.
Precisely. Critical thinking is often defined as a persistent, careful process. It's reflective thinking, not unreflective knee-jerk reactions. It encourages you not to jump to conclusions or make snap decisions.
Slow down and think.
Exactly. It's fundamentally about having good, supportive grounds and implications for one's beliefs. It's not about being cynical and disbelieving everything automatically, but about being discerning and having sound reasons based on evidence and logic for what you choose to accept as true.
So what are some of the key skills involved in this careful process of critical thinking? Can we break that down a bit more for the listener?
Absolutely. We can identify several core components, often overlapping. First, there's interpretation.
Interpretation.
Yeah, this is about comprehending and expressing the meaning of diverse experiences, situations, data, judgments, conventions, beliefs, rules, you name it. It involves recognizing problems without bias, clarifying meaning, and distinguishing, say, a main idea from subordinate ones in a text. For instance, being able to read a complex news report and accurately understand its core message, separating the reported facts from any potential spin or opinion woven in.
Okay, understand the meaning first. What's next?
That's followed by analysis. Analysis involves examining ideas, detecting arguments, whether stated or unstated, and identifying the reasons and claims being presented within a piece of information.
So taking it apart.
Exactly. It's about dissecting the message to understand its components and how they fit together, much like taking apart a machine to see how it works. So when someone makes a claim, you're actively looking for what are their supporting reasons, what are their underlying assumptions, maybe the things they don't say, what's the logical structure of their argument.
Got it. Interpretation, analysis, and then the big one, where ECREE really comes into play, must be evaluation.
Correct. Evaluation is where you make the judgment calls. It means assessing the credibility of claims and, crucially, the credibility of the sources making those claims. It involves determining if the evidence presented actually supports the conclusions being drawn.
Does the evidence match the claim?
Precisely. It includes recognizing factors that make a person a credible witness or a reliable authority on a subject. And it involves judging the logical strength of arguments. Are there fallacies? Is the reasoning sound? A key part of this, especially in today's world, is recognizing potential vested interest and bias.
Conflicts of interest.
Yes, because these can often be subtly entangled with the desire to be truthful. For instance, a pharmaceutical company genuinely wants to truthfully report the efficacy of its new drug, but it also has a massive financial interest in that drug performing well and getting approved. Both motives can be present simultaneously, and a critical thinker needs to be acutely aware of that potential conflict when evaluating the company's claims or studies.
That's a tricky balance, and it's not just about evaluating what's out there and the information we consume, is it? It's also about what's going on inside our own heads. Our own cognitive biases play a massive role in how we accept or reject extraordinary claims, don't they?
They play a huge role, absolutely. One of the most pervasive and powerful is confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. We look for stuff we already agree with.
Exactly. People naturally tend to seek out, interpret, and remember claims that confirm their prior beliefs. And, just as importantly, they tend to disregard, downplay, or rationalize away information that contradicts those beliefs. It's a mental shortcut, a way our brains try to be efficient, but it can severely hinder objective evaluation. If you already believe something strongly, you're much more likely to accept evidence for it, however weak, and much less likely to critically scrutinize it. And you'll find reasons to dismiss evidence against it.
So how do we fight that? It sounds pretty ingrained.
It is, but we can consciously work against it. One key strategy is cultivating what psychologists call actively open-minded thinking, or AOT.
Actively open-minded thinking. Okay.
This involves expressly seeking out and evaluating new information, especially information that might conflict with prior beliefs. It's not just being passively open, it's actively looking for the other side. It encapsulates the ability to reason analytically and resist bias.
So deliberately look for reasons you might be wrong.
Precisely. And research consistently shows that individuals who score higher on measures of AOT are linked to fewer anti-science attitudes, conspiracy beliefs, and paranormal beliefs, and lower susceptibility to fake news. They're actively more likely to seek out evidence against their cherished beliefs and consider it fairly, rather than just digging in and confirming what they already think.
That's a crucial distinction, actively seeking out disconfirming evidence. Not just confirming evidence. It's about being willing, genuinely willing, to change your mind if the evidence warrants it.
Exactly. And it's important maybe to reiterate that jump to conclusions bias, especially when it comes to pseudoscientific or fringe beliefs. Research suggests that individuals prone to these often require significantly less evidence before accepting conclusions that align with those beliefs.
They have a lower bar for proof if they want it to be true.
Essentially, yes. This is frequently driven by what psychologist Daniel Kahneman termed System 1 thinking. That's our fast, intuitive, automatic, low-effort cognitive process. It quickly accepts conclusions you already believe or that feel right and rejects those you don't. Think of it as your mental autopilot, great for routine tasks like driving a familiar route or making simple choices.
Okay, system one is the quick gut reaction.
Right. But for more complex phenomena, for evaluating nuanced arguments, or especially for assessing extraordinary claims, we absolutely need to engage System 2. That's our slower, more deliberate, analytical, effortful thinking process. It involves consciously following rules of logic, weighing options carefully, comparing features along multiple dimensions, and overriding those initial gut reactions. This is your conscious pilot, essential for navigating complex situations like evaluating a major financial investment, a complex scientific paper, or indeed a truly extraordinary claim.
So relying on system one, that gut feeling for extraordinary claims is precisely where critical thinking can fall apart.
That's often where the errors creep in. You need to consciously engage System 2 and apply principles like ECREE.
Okay, engaging that system two, that deliberate thinking process, is absolutely critical when we confront claims that really push the boundaries of our current understanding, claims that are pretty much, by definition, extraordinary. One such area that has captured a lot of public attention recently, really sitting at the edge of our knowledge, is the phenomenon of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs.
Formerly UFOs, yeah.
Right, commonly known as UFOs. How does ECREE apply here?
Well, this is a classic case study for applying the principle, especially the idea of prior probabilities we talked about. From a purely probabilistic standpoint, given everything we do know about human perception, psychology, atmospheric phenomena, technology like drones, and the vast history of misidentification and hoaxes, it is several orders of magnitude more likely that someone is lying or mistaken about seeing an alien spacecraft than that actual extraterrestrial spacecraft or biological entities exist and are operating secretly on Earth without any clear, unambiguous, publicly verifiable scrutiny throughout history.
So, mistaken identity is just way more probable.
Vastly more probable. The likelihood of aliens being here undetected is objectively only slightly higher than being visited by magical pink unicorns. Mainly because, well, aliens are at least plausible under the laws of physics as we understand them. We can conceive of life elsewhere, unicorns less so.
Okay.
But we simply don't know if the kind of advanced vehicles often described or the technology needed to power them even exist anywhere in the universe, let alone here. And certainly ordinary people don't just have one sitting in their garage that could be independently studied.
Right, and there are common psychological factors involved too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Pareidolia, our tendency to see patterns where none exist, like faces in clouds or canals on Mars. Misidentification of conventional aircraft, weather balloons, atmospheric phenomena like ice crystals or plasma, lens flares, birds, insects. The list is long. And then there's just plain wishful thinking, often fueled by decades of science fiction and cultural narratives about aliens. All vastly more likely explanations than actual extraterrestrial visitors, based on prior probability.
That makes perfect sense. It's about weighing what's most probable given everything we do know. So what about the challenge of physical proof for UAPs? We see so many blurry videos and photos online, but are they ever enough to meet that extraordinary evidence bar?
By themselves, absolutely not. A blurry photo or a shaky video could be photoshopped, easily faked, or, more likely, it could just be a drone, a bird, a balloon reflecting sunlight weirdly, a plane seen from an odd angle.
Mundane explanations.
Far more mundane, far more probable explanations. Even seeing something strange in person with your own eyes still leaves immense questions. Was it actually flying under intelligent control? What was its true nature, size, distance? Human perception is notoriously unreliable, especially under stress or when observing something unexpected.
So eyewitness accounts aren't enough either.
Not for something this extraordinary, for a claim that would completely upend our understanding of physics, biology, and our place in the cosmos. The evidence needs to be incredibly robust, unambiguous, and direct, not just anecdotal, fuzzy, or easily manipulated. One might reasonably demand, as Sagan suggested, to actually ride in one, or at the very least, for a consistent, verifiable physical artifact, a piece of wreckage, an undeniable energy signature to be presented for widespread, independent scientific analysis by multiple international teams.
Something tangible and testable by anyone.
Exactly. Anything less is merely suggestive, intriguing perhaps, but it falls far short of extraordinary proof.
So how is NASA, with its reputation for rigorous scientific inquiry and public trust, approaching the UAP phenomenon now?
Yeah.
It feels like there's been a bit of a shift in how these sightings are treated, less immediate dismissal maybe.
There has been a shift, yes. NASA is leveraging its long-standing public trust to try and destigmatize UAP reporting. Historically, pilots, Military personnel, even civilians, often feared ridicule or career damage if they reported strange aerial sightings.
Right, the giggle factor.
Exactly. And that hindered systematic data collection. So NASA's stated aim now is to model how to best approach the study of UAP by utilizing transparent reporting, rigorous analysis, and public engagement. They want to bring scientific methodology to bear on the data that is available.
How are they doing that?
Primarily by emphasizing the need for collecting structured data, not just anecdotes, but data from multiple well-calibrated sensors operating simultaneously. Think radar, infrared, optical, etc.
Multiple viewpoints, multiple sensors.
Right. And using advanced analytical tools like artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, ML, to sift through vast data sets from satellites, ground sensors, etc., to identify rare occurrences or potential patterns that might represent genuinely anomalous events.
So, using AI to find the needle in the haystack.
That's the idea. The difficulty, of course, lies in comprehensively envisioning all possible signals, especially those that might come from new technology or new physics we don't even understand yet. AI and ML are very powerful at finding patterns similar to what they've been trained on, but they can struggle with truly novel phenomena that don't fit existing categories.
So it's still a huge challenge.
A massive challenge. While NASA's approach emphasizes data collection, rigorous analysis, and transparency, it also implicitly acknowledges that the claims themselves, particularly the extraterrestrial hypothesis, remain extraordinary, and therefore they demand an extraordinary level of clear, unambiguous evidence far beyond what has been presented to date. They're trying to improve the data quality, not necessarily saying the claims are likely true.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, moving from the possibly physical, like UAPs, to the distinctly non-physical, or perhaps transcendent. Let's explore the really nuanced debate surrounding extraordinary claims when applied to religious or supernatural beliefs. This is where the discussion often gets quite heated and complex, isn't it? It touches on very personal, deeply held worldviews.
It absolutely does, and it really highlights the different domains of knowledge and belief that people operate within. One common perspective argues that concepts like God, for many believers, are fundamentally transcendent. God is not seen as just another being among beings taking up space in the empirical realm of the universe.
So, outside the realm of science.
That's the argument. Therefore, attempting to prove or disprove God's existence by scientific evidence alone is as absurd as trying to prove or disprove Napoleon's historical existence by geometry alone. This view suggests that God, or the ultimate divine reality, is outside the scope of empirical testability, and therefore scientific evidence isn't the appropriate tool or the right kind of evidence to use. Belief in this context might stem from faith, spiritual experience, philosophical reasoning, tradition, or revelation, different ways of knowing.
Okay, so that's one view, wrong toolbox for the job.
Yeah.
But then there's a powerful counterargument to that, isn't there? One that still applies ECREE even to these concepts.
Yes, there is, particularly when religious claims do make assertions about the empirical world. Another perspective contends that imagining an all-powerful superbeing that created the entire universe, potentially violating known physical laws without a shred of verifiable empirical evidence. Well, that is an extraordinary claim all by itself.
The claim itself is extraordinary.
Exactly, and therefore it requires incredibly groundbreaking evidence. The critique here is that proposing a being or force that might act within or upon the natural world, performing miracles, answering prayers in observable ways, having created the universe in a specific, testable manner, does bring the claim into the realm where empirical evidence becomes relevant. If a divine being is said to interact with the physical world, then that interaction should, in principle, be detectable and require extraordinary evidence, just like any other claim about the physical world.
Right. If it affects reality, it should be testable in reality.
That's the counter-argument.
A central challenge in this realm, though, whether you're talking about invisible dragons or certain types of supernatural claims, is that concept we touched on earlier, unfalsifiability.
Absolutely. Unfalsifiable claims are a major hurdle. These are claims that can't be proven wrong even in principle and therefore aren't testable with evidence. If a claim like our invisible, intangible, heatless, hovering dragon,
or a deity defined as purely transcendent and non-interactive.
Exactly. If it cannot be disproven by any conceivable observation or experiment, then it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to establish scientifically. How can you provide extraordinary evidence or any evidence, really, for something that, by its very definition, cannot be tested or observed directly or indirectly. It often shifts the burden of proof into an impossible realm where the claimant can always argue that the evidence simply hasn't been found yet, or that it's beyond human comprehension, or requires special faith to perceive.
Which effectively takes it outside of evidence-based discussion.
Often, yes.
So what about the role of personal testimony or anecdotal evidence in this context? It's so incredibly prevalent in religious claims, right? Countless people describe profound personal experiences, visions, answered prayers, feelings of divine presence, witnessing what they firmly believe are divine interventions. How does ECREE view that kind of evidence?
Personal testimony, while deeply compelling and meaningful to the individual experiencing it, generally doesn't work as objective evidence for establishing the factual truth of the underlying supernatural claim. Why? Because, as skeptics often point out, all religions have this type of evidence. Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, followers of countless other faiths throughout history have reported equally profound, life-changing spiritual experiences, visions, and perceived miracles supporting their specific, often mutually exclusive beliefs.
And they can't all be literally true if they contradict each other.
Precisely. If one person's profound spiritual experience is taken as objective proof for their religion, then the equally profound but often contradictory experiences of followers of other religions must also be taken as proof, which leads to an irreconcilable paradox from an objective standpoint. People may come to believe things very strongly without sufficient objective evidence due to powerful emotion or trust in equally ignorant authority figures or deep cultural conditioning.
Confirmation bias again.
Confirmation bias plays a massive role here, absolutely. People naturally prioritize and remember experiences and information that align with their existing beliefs and social group, leading to acceptance of claims congruent with their faith, sometimes even where there's evidence to the contrary from a scientific or historical perspective. Remember the sun dancing example. If 300 people claim to see the sun dancing in the sky, that's still not sufficient evidence to overturn physics, especially if those 300 people are similarly biased. For example, if they all share the same intense religious belief system, are gathered together expecting a miracle, or if they're all in a single isolated location. For a phenomenon that would fundamentally alter our understanding of the universe, you would absolutely expect those worldwide witnesses, scientists, astronomers, pilots, ordinary people across the globe using calibrated instruments to independently corroborate it. And the profound lack of the worldwide witnesses is strong evidence against the extraordinary claim being objectively true in a physical sense.
So personal experience is powerful subjectively, but not objective proof for others.
Generally, yes, when it comes to establishing objective facts about reality that would apply to everyone.
So overall, who bears the burden of proof in these discussions, especially when a claim is so far outside the ordinary, be it religious, paranormal, or pseudoscientific?
Generally speaking, in rational discourse and scientific inquiry, the side making the positive claim, the assertion that something exists or is true, bears the primary responsibility to provide the evidence.
The person saying God exists, or ghosts are real, or this crystal heals.
Exactly. Or Santa Claus is real, or this supplement cures cancer. They bear the burden of proof. It's not the responsibility of the dismissers or the skeptics to definitively disprove the claim, especially if the claim is vaguely defined or unfalsifiable. As the saying goes, it would be silly to believe in Santa Claus simply because you can't prove his existence wrong. The extraordinary nature of the claim places the onus, the burden, firmly on the claimant to provide sufficient, credible, extraordinary evidence. You don't assume something is true just because you can't prove it's false.
That's a really important principle. The burden of proof lies with the positive claim.
Wow. Okay, switching gears a bit to a more applied area, let's talk about human decision-making under uncertainty. This is a huge part of how we interact with technology today, especially with automated systems and AI. Uncertainty is just an inherent part of so many real-world decision problems, isn't it?
Absolutely unavoidable. Think about identifying anomalies on a satellite. Is that weird reading an electrical fault, or is the thruster malfunctioning? Or classifying radar targets, is that blip a flock of birds or a potentially hostile aircraft? Or simply managing air traffic control in a complex, busy airspace. Robust decision-making systems, especially those that leverage AI and machine learning, must be designed to explicitly account for this inherent uncertainty. They have to operate with probabilities, confidence levels, not false certainties.
Right, they can't just say it's definitely X. Not if they want to be useful and safe. They need to say it's highly probable it's X with this level of confidence, but there's a small chance it's Y. This is a crucial practical application of probabilistic thinking and understanding the weight of evidence in a dynamic environment.
And the interface between us, the human users, and these automated decision support systems is particularly interesting here, right?
Right.
Especially regarding trust.
Oh, trust is absolutely paramount. In this context, trust is often defined as the user's expectation of reliability and technically competent performance from the system. You need to trust that the system will generally do its job accurately and provide useful information most of the time.
But that trust can be misplaced, can it?
It can, and that leads to problems. One issue is willful miscalibration of trust. This is where humans might consciously or unconsciously over-rely or under-rely on a system due to their own biases, their level of confidence in their own judgment, or even fear.
Give me an example.
Sure. A fatigued air traffic controller might over-rely on an automated collision avoidance system, maybe becoming complacent and assuming it's infallible, even when it gives a questionable alert or misses something subtle. They trust it too much.
Okay. And under-reliance.
Conversely, a pilot who's had a bad experience with an older, less reliable autopilot system in the past might under-rely on a new, highly accurate one. They might constantly second-guess it or unnecessarily override its recommendations, potentially increasing workload, or even making an error the system would have caught.
So getting that trust level right is key.
It's critical, and it relates back to ECREE because no decision support system can ever be correct 100% of the time. No system is perfect. Therefore, it's critical that the other member of the system team, the human user, maintains the functioning of the overall system. The human is still in charge, ultimately.
The human has to stay in the loop.
Exactly. This requires deep understanding, transparency in the system's logic. The system needs to explain why it's making a recommendation, and robust training. The human needs to remain engaged and capable to override or supplement the decision support system when the decision support goes awry, like when it produces an extraordinary, improbable, or seemingly incorrect claim or recommendation.
Like if the system flags an incoming radar target as 99% probability alien spacecraft.
Precisely. The human needs to understand how the system reached that highly improbable conclusion, what data it used, what its uncertainty level really is before acting on it. They need context to evaluate that extraordinary claim from the machine. The goal is not to replace human judgment entirely, but to augment it effectively, creating a human AI team where both understand the evidence and the probabilities. #tag the evolving standards of evidence.
Okay, we've used the word proof quite a bit throughout this deep dive, sometimes interchangeably with evidence. But it seems crucial to clarify what proof actually means, especially in science versus other contexts like law or philosophy, because they seem to operate under different standards.
That's a really fundamental distinction to make, yes. Science, generally speaking, does not prove anything in an absolute, final, mathematical sense, like you prove a theorem in geometry. Instead, science is primarily concerned with corroboration and falsification.
Corroboration and falsification, meaning?
Meaning science continually tests hypotheses, gathers evidence that supports or corroborates them, but also actively tries to falsify them to find evidence that contradicts them. Science knows that, logically speaking, one factual exception is sufficient to disprove a claim, stated as a universal law. The goal is to build models of reality that best fit all the observed data, explain phenomena effectively, and make accurate predictions while always being ready to discard or significantly refine those models when new, compelling, contradictory evidence emerges.
So scientific proof is always provisional, always open to revision based on new evidence.
Exactly. It's the best explanation we have right now, supported by the current weight of evidence. This contrasts sharply with the concept of proof in, say, a legal context. Law often requires different standards depending on the situation.
Like beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. In criminal cases, the standard is typically proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard, defined sometimes as doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate in the most important of his or her affairs. But it's still not absolute certainty. In civil cases, the standard is often lower, merely a preponderance of the evidence, meaning just more likely than not, or over 50% probability.
So legal proof is about convincing a reasonable person beyond a certain threshold of doubt, which varies, but it's different from absolute certainty.
Correct. And then philosophically, the word proof often carries connotations of absolute certainty, like a logical demonstration in geometry, where you logically deduce an undeniable truth from agreed-upon axioms. Science, by its very nature as an empirical enterprise based on observation, simply cannot provide that level of absolute, unchanging proof. Partly because, as we've said, we never have all the data, and our understanding is constantly evolving.
That makes sense. Science deals with provisional truths based on observation and testing.
Precisely. And this brings us right back to David Hume's enduring principle about weighing different forms of evidence. He advised, remember, a wise man weighs the opposite experiments, and to know the exact force of the superior evidence, one must essentially deduct the smaller number from the greater.
Like balancing a scale.
Exactly. It means assessing competing claims based on the balance of supporting and contradictory observations, much like keeping a mental ledger of probabilities based on past experience.
Can you give us another practical, everyday example of this balance of evidence in action? How we do this intuitively?
Certainly. Consider if someone you know is late for a meeting and offers traffic as the excuse. In most urban environments, that's a highly credible claim, right?
Yeah, happens all the time.
Because historically, based on common experience and maybe even real-time traffic apps, traffic is a correct and plausible explanation well over 99% of the time in many situations. You'd likely accept it without much further questioning. The prior probability is very high.
Okay.
But now, imagine if they claimed alien abduction as their reason for being late.
Right. Definitely extraordinary.
Definitely extraordinary, even if we hypothetically said, just for argument's sake, that in some bizarre, specific context, this excuse had been offered 68 times in history, and someone, somewhere, claimed it was correct 19 times, meaning someone alleged it happened, which is about 28%. That's still an incredibly, vanishingly low prior probability compared to traffic. It remains an extraordinary claim demanding far, far more scrutiny, maybe even a trip to the nearest therapist or UFO research center, depending on how seriously you took it. The lower the prior probability based on background knowledge, the more compelling the new evidence needs to be to shift your belief significantly.
Okay, that highlights the prior probability part really well. So what about eyewitness testimony? We often put a lot of stock in it in everyday life, even in courtrooms. Where does that fit into ECREE? Is extraordinary evidence?
Eyewitness testimony is complicated. It's generally considered perfectly fine for a car accident, for example. Why? Because car accidents are ordinary, common events. People frequently witness them and can often accurately recount the basic sequence of events, although details can still be fuzzy or distorted by memory.
So, okay, for ordinary claims.
Generally, yes, it's considered reasonable evidence for ordinary events. However, if, going back to that example, 300 people see the sun dancing erratically in the sky, as has been claimed in certain historical religious apparitions, this is generally not considered sufficient evidence by scientific standards to overturn all known laws of physics and astronomy. Why not? Especially if those 300 people are potentially similarly biased, for instance, if they all share a specific intense belief system, are gathered together in an emotionally charged atmosphere expecting a sign, or if they are all confined to a single geographical location at a single moment.
The lack of outside confirmation.
Exactly. For something that would fundamentally alter our understanding of the universe, the sun deviating from its course, you would absolutely expect those worldwide witnesses. You'd expect astronomers, physicists, ordinary people across the globe with cameras and telescopes to independently corroborate such a monumental event. And the profound lack of the worldwide witnesses, the lack of independent, unbiased corroboration, is itself powerful evidence against the extraordinary claim being an objective physical reality. The magnitude and extraordinariness of the claim demand global, independent, verifiable corroboration, not just localized, potentially biased group testimony.
That makes perfect sense. The scope of the evidence needs to match the scope of the claim's implications. So how then do truly extraordinary scientific discoveries accumulate the necessary extraordinary evidence over time? You said it's often not one big bang of proof, right?
Precisely. It's rarely a single smoking gun experiment or observation that changes everything overnight. Think about the development of the nuclear bomb again. If you had told a physicist in, say, 1900 that in just about 40 years, humanity would possess a single bomb, not particularly enormous in physical size, that could instantly level an entire city,
They would have laughed.
they would have rightly dismissed it as an utterly extraordinary claim, probably impossible. Why? Because it flatly contradicted the established understanding of chemical energy at the time. They would have pointed out, correctly based on 1900 physics, that something of that size simply could not possibly contain that much releasable energy based on all known chemical principles.
Okay, so how did that change?
Through decades of subsequent scientific progress. through many seemingly separate individual pieces of evidence that are not quite extraordinary, on their own discoveries about radioactivity, uncovering the structure of the atom, the nucleus, Einstein's famous EMC sought showing the equivalence of mass and energy, experiments demonstrating nuclear fission, and the realization that splitting atoms can release a lot of energy.
Lots of little steps.
Lots of little and some big steps. These eventually accumulated to provide the overwhelming, undeniable, extraordinary evidence needed to demonstrate this terrifying new possibility. It wasn't one single observation, but rather a vast, interlocking accumulation of corroborating data from various experiments, theoretical breakthroughs, and observations across physics and chemistry that collectively forced a fundamental paradigm shift in understanding energy and matter. The evidence became extraordinary through convergence and overwhelming consistency.
That's a fantastic illustration of how our understanding, and therefore what we consider to be extraordinary, can change dramatically over time. What seems utterly impossible or laughably extraordinary one day can become a demonstrable, even terrifying reality the next, thanks to the slow, painstaking accumulation of robust, converging evidence.
Absolutely. And we must always retain some humility and remember that our current laws of nature are, in essence, nothing more than inductive generalizations based on the evidence and observations accumulated so far. We never have all the data, and our understanding is always incomplete. Newtonian mechanics, for instance, was considered an incredibly accurate, almost complete description of nature for centuries.
Until Einstein.
Until Einstein showed it broke down at relativistic speeds, and quantum mechanics showed it failed at very small scales. They required entirely new paradigms.
Or your water example.
Right, a simpler example. A claim that water could turn into a solid would be genuinely extraordinary and violate the known laws of nature for someone who had lived their entire life in a consistently hot tropical climate, where they'd only ever experienced water as a liquid or a gas steam.
Their experience wouldn't include ice.
Exactly. Their accumulated experience, their inductive generalization about water, wouldn't include freezing. This implies that what is considered extraordinary is relative to our current scientific understanding of the world, and it can, and absolutely does, change as that understanding evolves and as we gather more data from different contexts. When a phenomenon appears a lot outside the model, meaning it genuinely can't be explained by our current best theories, even after careful checking, it might require big changes or even a whole new model. This is how scientific revolutions happen, leading to new paradigms in scientific thought that can accommodate all the available evidence, both old and new. This reflects that science is fundamentally a dynamic process, not a fixed dogma. It allows for failure, for being wrong, and crucially, for the overturning of even long-established conclusions based on stronger, more comprehensive, extraordinary evidence when it finally arrives.
It's a constant process of refinement based on evidence. Okay, so wrapping this up. In a world where information and misinformation spreads instantly, where algorithms can easily reinforce our existing biases, and where compelling yet completely unfounded claims can go viral in minutes, the courage, maybe the intellectual discipline, to demand extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. It really isn't just some abstract scientific principle, is it?
No, not at all.
It feels more like a fundamental civic responsibility, a necessary skill for navigating modern life. Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. What extraordinary claim are you holding to, perhaps without even fully realizing it's extraordinary? And what kind of evidence would it truly take to convince you otherwise?
And remember, truly engaging with the world critically means continually questioning, interpreting, analyzing, and evaluating the claims that bombard you every single day, whether they're coming from a news headline, a politician, a friend, a social media feed, an advertisement, or even from your own internal biases and assumptions. It's an active, ongoing process, not a passive acceptance. It's about consciously building a more robust, evidence-based framework for your beliefs about the world.
Thanks for listening to All in All.